what happened to EVs, right? So back in 2020, there was a ton of hype surrounding the electric vehicle market, right? It was a literal EV revolution, if you will. And a lot of the hype surrounding the EVs at that time was brought on by the government, promising to dedicate their focus on a cleaner environment by moving away from gas-powered vehicles. In fact, they were so high on EV that they were talking about not only incentivizing the automaker plants to push EV production out to customers and giving them special tax breaks, but they were also looking to start federally mandating that it be put into law that certain states like California would be penalized for anyone still driving around gas-powered vehicles past the year 2035. And it was a goal that some called ambitious and many others called stupid and impossible. But given the circumstances at that time and the government doubling down, if you will, on the expansion of EVs, it ended up translating to the stock market and consumer sentiment. Everybody, all of a sudden, started to believe in a world where EVs were the dominant market. And so we started to see a reflection of this in the stock market, and more specifically, stocks that revolved around EVs, right? Companies like Rivian, Volta, Nikola, Lucid Motors, and of course the stock we're talking about today, Chargepoint. All of these EV companies have one thing in common. They all peaked at the top of the hype surrounding the EV industry back in 2020 and 2021 and have since completely flatlined. Chargepoint in particular is down 90% all time. And right now, as we start up 2025, it's looking more and more like the naysayers were right. So let's take a quick look at ChargePoint's laughable stock price and see if it's worth investing in now that the stock price is close to touching 99 cents per share. We're going to do this quickly, so I'm going to break this down into 4 different parts. The first part is consumer sentiment. The second part will be product demand. The third part will be the business. And the fourth part will be future speculation. All right. So starting with number 1, consumer sentiment. Consumer sentiment is a metric that is one of the most important pieces to the EV industry. The people have to believe in the product. They have to believe in the likelihood that the EV industry becomes mainstream in the next 10 to 20 years. That's important. They have to buy into the idea that EVs are the better, more fundamental source of transportation and that it's economical going forward, right? And I mean financially. And simply put, the vast majority right now do not believe in EVs. I know we want to believe that everybody cares about the atmosphere and preserving our way of life through clean and efficient fuel sources, but if we're being real and if we're being honest, people care more about how these things affect their pocketbooks versus how it affects the air quality in their city. And that's just the hard truth. I'm sorry. It is, all right? People don't care as much as you want them to about the earth and the atmosphere when it comes to paying out of the pocketbooks. They just don't. And number 2, let's move on to product demand. As a result of what I just said in my first point about consumer sentiment, the product demand for more EVs just isn't there right now. The use case for more efficient, more affordable, clean energy vehicles has not been made to the majority of consumers. When most people think about EVs, they immediately think about A, how expensive they are, and B, how they would have to find a charging station near them in order to charge up their vehicle. And for the everyday average consumer, that's just not a thought that is very appealing to most people who already hate stopping to get gas. They hate doing anything out of the way. You think they want to stop to charge their Fiat 500 for a couple of hours? No. And, you might say, well, what if they had a charger port at home? Well, now you're talking about another expense that the majority of people can't really afford nowadays. Depending on the level that you want installed, it can cost you anywhere from $600 to $3,000, and that's just for the install, okay, depending on where you live and how difficult it is to install that whole setup to your particular residence. I haven't hadn't even gotten to how it would impact your monthly electric bill either, right? Good luck trying to sell people on the idea of another monthly bill added to their expenses that they already have when the average American doesn't even have $1,000 saved up in their emergency fund. It's a hard sell. And you might say, well, the government said that they would offer special breaks for EV installs. Even still, it's a hard sell to the average American. And can we really count on the government coming through and keeping their word on that as we go on down the line? That's something you might want to think about, because I haven't heard anything about it lately. Number 3, the business. The business surrounding these EV market companies, outside of really Tesla and maybe one or two others, right, just isn't good, okay? It's not good at the moment. And this is true for nearly every company across the board that is focused on EV production. But in terms of Chargepoint specifically, it's bad, okay? Their financial growth is in a decline when this should theoretically be the time they're building in revenue. And I mean, it's really quite simple. It's basic economics at this point, right? If you're not making money, then you're losing money. And many of you know that this is not a financial pattern that any relatively newer company can sustain for any long period of time without some kind of significant turnaround, because cash flow is king. When it comes to the world of business, cash flow means everything. And unfortunately, the infrastructure has not yet caught up to the ambitions of the EV revolution. Lastly, number 4, future speculation. Now, back in mid-December of last year, okay, Chargepoint showed signs of life when the GM announced that they were going to be doing a team up with GM. GM was going to be doing a team up with Chargepoint to install 500 new EV stations across the U.S. And these stations are expected to be available for consumers by the end of this year. Now, unfortunately, this news didn't do much for Chargepoint stock. Hell, it didn't do much for GM stock either. But it did place a reasonable amount of interest in the back recesses of my mind. In the far back recesses of my mind, it did spark something. Now, realistically, I think the world won't be ready to completely adopt the EV market for another 30 to 50 years. That's being realistic, okay? But even so, assuming that there is a world, or better yet, an economy that fully adopts EVs and makes them the standard, then is there a possibility that Chargepoint, among some of these other EV-focused brands, will one day grow to be one of the greatest investments of all time, considering it's sitting at just over $1 today? Well, I think to answer that question, you have to approach this on an individual basis, okay, and consider a few things. What is your time horizon for your investments, okay? And do you have one, okay? Are you one day looking to retire on your investments and sell them off completely? Or are you looking to just buy and hold until your kids come of age and then they can benefit from all your hard work, right? But it's really a question that is on an individual basis. Let me say that I do see a world where EV is the dominant consumer staple among vehicles. The problem is, I just don't know when that will happen. There would have to be an entire overhaul of our energy infrastructure to make this more mainstream, and billions of dollars put into it. And I just don't think that these multi-billion-dollar companies that are already making money hand over fist every year are ready and willing to take that hit on revenue, right? They would have to endure in order to see this type of project through. And there is one other option to consider with Chargepoint, aside from the EVs suddenly shooting to the moon. It's possible that this stock could fall so low in price depreciation that another bigger company or entity could come along and extend them a life raft, right? And either offer to buy Chargepoint outright or enter into some type of agreement for a substantial share of the business. In either case, that would theoretically be a huge win for any Chargepoint shareholders. At nearly $1 per share right now, I wouldn't mind, okay, this is me personally, buying and holding a few shares of an EV company like Chargepoint and seeing what happens in the distant future. But am I willing to bet the farm on an investment into Chargepoint right this second with everything? No. The fundamentals and the overall consumer sentiment aren't giving me any confidence in going all in. But I do believe that the EV stock sector of the market is certainly worth keeping a very, very, very close eye on and maybe drip feeding into it. A couple shares here, a couple shares there, right? But listen, you all know, I always say you've got to make a choice for yourself. You've got to look at this. You've got to guesstimate, unfortunately, because we have no other data to go off of. We don't know how this thing is going to go in the future. We don't know how this thing is going to go going forward with the EV market. But if I had to guess, I would say that at some point, maybe in the far distant future, the EV revolution will happen, and it will cause the world to completely change our infrastructure and abandon everything that we sort of built this country on as far as when we're talking about vehicles. But right now, there's a lot of people saying that you should stay away from any EV companies, but like Chargepoint. But I think, I don't know, it's really difficult to see the EVs going away entirely. I think they're going to do the opposite eventually, which makes me optimistic about any possible future endeavors with Chargepoint. So I think for me personally, I'll be buying a couple shares here, maybe a couple shares there, nothing too crazy. So that, you know, even if I do, it goes belly up, it won't be any skin off my back, a couple dollars lost, you know. But I'm just thinking about the other way that this could go. There's a huge amount of upside potential, in my opinion, for companies like Chargepoint. So you all let me know what you think down in the comments. Don't want this video to be 80 minutes long. Let me know what you think, and I will definitely be reading. Remember to invest diligently, but more importantly, invest responsibly. And I'll see y'all in the next one.